Dear instructor, hello. Here I am again doing this week's reflective activity, this time on cultural bonds. The first question is how I was able to apply the techniques for encouraging my colleagues to reflect. Well, I think I've been using some of those techniques implicitly for many years now. It comes to mind now that the same happened when I translated without being acquainted with the translation techniques, and I only realized I had been using them when I began to study translation theory. Thus, for example, I have always acted and read actively, trying not to make internal speeches while my interlocutor is speaking. And I have always made sure I understand and ask for clarification in case I'm not sure. When you read what I have written to my colleagues, you will see how I start by being sympathetic. In other words, recognizing their emotional side and saying, I understand their position and giving a reason. For instance, I concurred with Mariam that hand feeding the people was a matter of hygiene. And once I said this, I shared my point of view, and I quote, I think I understand being acted like that because she belongs to a high context culture, where space is communal and where a person's identity is firmly established in the family, in the community. And then I asked her rhetorically, what if Vinci did that as a sign that she thought of the language unique colleagues as her relatives and friends? I also get her to think about the future, namely when I tell her, let's suppose you are involved in the same situation again. Do you think you would not take a piece of cake or another eatable item given the fact you are not so fond of cake? In addressing Elena, I kind of recognized her emotional side when I said to her that she might not have had a cultural bomb, but she had a cultural shock. I then go on to take sides with her in her determination not to be passive in her new temporary situation and take some actions that in the long run change the state of affairs and brought her and her hosts together. Then, where the cultural patterns change over time, I take an objective stance and ask her up to what point present-day young and teenage women share this value of, I quote, cooking meals themselves and do all housework first so that everybody is happy and everything is clean. How did my comments affect them? Well, one of them thanked me for getting her point right. She thinks back and wishes she could have spent more time at her friend's home back in the States cooking and cleaning the house. Thus, you can tell she has taken thought of the situation she was involved in. She responds one of my questions by saying that today's Russian young women are very different and that most of them are not in a hurry to marry before getting a well-paid job and earning a good salary, and would rather go to dinner in a cafe or restaurant than do so at home, unlike women of her generation. She goes on to point that some girls, however, do not mind staying at home and doing all the housework as long as their husband provides a decent living for the whole family. And she also reflects on some today's men, like her own son, for who it is okay to clean the house and do some housework chores. She ends by affirming that no matter the label of her culture, be it polychronic, monochronic, high context, or low context, this is how the Russian people adjust to living in the 21st century. On the other hand, there is clearly a connection between being able to encourage others to reflect, critical thinking, and active listening. I commented to Elena how complex and beautiful intercultural communication is. But it is only beautiful when we know how to rightly manage the process. Yes, because reflection will only be complete and integral when accompanied by critical thinking techniques and active listening. In week 3 reflective activity, I explicitly said that After listening actively, we reflect on what we have listened to, and this reflection should be accompanied by a set of skills and techniques inherent in critical thinking. And then I said, I always use this trilogy in my classes constantly. Reflection, active listening, and critical thinking guarantee the success of the communication process and avoid the undesirable conflict. It would be good if one of the sides in the communication process mastered these three components, but it would be great if the two sides mastered them. How do I use these three components in my class? Reflection, active listening, and critical thinking. Well, something I like to do in classes is information gap activities, because this is challenging and it offers more chances to implement this trilogy. Because I do this in such a way that the students have a numbered piece of paper and a brief piece of information. For example, number one, you are on the corner of, and number two, you are from the USA, you are in town for the first time and you need to go to the post office. Ask a local. You see? In this way, when I call out the numbers, the students come in front of the class and have to act out what they have, and to that end, the two of them must listen actively because they haven't negotiated the task together in advance, as it is usually done in class. The student playing the local will have to reflect on how to give the right directions before responding, in keeping with where they are, and make sure the other has understood. And they will also have to use the right forms of address, sir, miss, and so forth, together with the formula excuse me, to draw the other person's attention. And the task could also be an opportunity to introduce and compare some rules of etiquette, nonverbal communication behaviors, and so forth. The student's metacognition is also revealed in this task. One more example. A couple of days ago, I happened to analyze a text in class, The Changing Family, taken from Interchange 1. I told the class to look at the artwork and tell how many people made up that family and compare it to an average Cape Verdean family in terms of the number of people. Then I asked them why they thought the text is entitled The Changing Family. They said because the family is bigger, as now they have more children, because the children now go to school, and some other reasons. Then, after reading for answering which out of two questions is the one which is really answered in the text, they had to say what problems the married couple was having now that the wife was working, and then they must offer solutions for the problem, and this was done in small groups, 2 or 3 students. This is an activity where they apply reflection, active reading, and critical thinking together. And they apply critical thinking because in offering solutions, they will think of some universal values and issues women and mothers go through, and at the same time, they will think of some problems Cape Verdean mothers and women and families have that U.S. women, mothers, and families, broadly speaking, do not have. Finally, in giving their opinion as to the most serious problem the married couple is having, a concept as the after-school program mentioned in the text and non-existent in their culture is introduced, and the students can be told to look up information about it on the internet. Likewise, we discuss some male chauvinism-related aspects in their social context from Steve, the male character in the text, who doesn't like to do the housework. To me, this reflection doesn't go beyond level 4. That is the phase where I express my colleagues how I view their situation. In other words, I explain their situation from my own perspective, and ask them questions so that they reflect on the other side present in their cultural bond. This is it. Thank you.